Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron May. I'm a Senior Manager of Trading and Derivatives Education here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And 2 weeks ago, we launched a new series of lessons that are intended to bring that brand new user of Thinkorswim along their personal learning curve, get them very acquainted with the powerful tools available on the platform, get them accustomed to navigation of the platform. So today is lesson 3 in that series. We're just moving through in a very methodical way. We've been moving across the top of the rows of the top row of tabs, and today we're going to be talking about the functions on the Trade tab on Thinkorswim Desktop. Now, I say this is kind of for beginners, but actually I think there's going to be something to be learned for everyone, regardless of the amount of experience they might have with the Thinkorswim platform. We're going to be taking a pretty close look at just about every button, not every single one, but getting pretty highly acquainted with the tools on the Trade tab today. So before we dive into that, let me first of all say hello to everybody who's already chatting in on YouTube in our live stream. Great to see Janelle and Mighty Mouse, Richard, Austin, Eva, everybody else. Thanks for joining us week after week. I really do appreciate your attendance and your contributions to these discussions. If you're here for the very first time, you're in a great place and welcome. Good to have you here. And if you're watching on the YouTube archive after the fact, if you're watching the recording of this webcast, well, enjoy the show, but be aware that you're invited to join us in a live presentation. This is a Wednesday webcast series, and we kick things off promptly at 2 Eastern time. We'd love to have you here in the live stream audience. And to help our live stream audience members out, we have my very good friend Kevin Horner is hanging out in the chats. He's going to be addressing any questions that I can't get to just during the natural flow of the presentation, as long as they don't take us too far off topic. Kevin's there to help pick up my slack. Thanks for having my back there, Kevin. And Kevin and I would like to issue an invitation to everybody watching. If you have an account on X, you should be following your favorite presenters there on X. You can give us a follow. It doesn't cost anything. You can follow Kevin there at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me on X at Cameron May CS. Just this morning, I've been on there probably back and forth with about 10 or 15 different people who have commented on one of my posts. I try to reply right back. But yeah, great way to make a connection when the live streams aren't running. In any case, let's dive into this. And as we do, of course, we need to consider the risks of trading and investing first. These disclosures are important, so bear them in mind. The information here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or endorsement of any particular security, chart pattern, or investment strategy. Options carry a high level of risk and are not suitable for all investors. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as sole means of investment research, and investing involves risks, including the loss of principal. Okay, so very straightforward agenda today. We're just continuing our series of lessons. We've already been through downloading and navigating Thinkorswim, and in lesson 2, we talked through the Monitor tab. Today, it's all about the Trade tab. And before we're done today, we're going to be placing some example trades. I'm going to try to fit in a stock order. I'm going to try to fit in an options trade, but then we're also just going to click around, just get acquainted with navigation and with the tools. All right, so let's go right to the Thinkorswim desktop trading software platform. And if you happen to miss lesson 1, I showed how to download this. So if you don't know, quick recap. This is software that can be downloaded free of charge from within your Schwab Online account. You would just go up to the Trade tab on schwabonline.com, and then look for the keyword Thinkorswim. Click on that. There'll be a big blue button. It'll just guide you through the process. Just follow the on-screen prompts, and you'll be in business there. And as you log into Thinkorswim, just use your Schwab username and password. All right, so here we are on the desktop software. We talked about the Monitor tab last week, so let's just move over one to the right and talk about the Trade tab. And when we first launch it, it's just going to be blank. It's ready to help us place trade orders. But the first thing that we need to tell the system is, what do we want to trade? So for today's example, let's do Apple. Trading symbol is AAPL. If we didn't know the symbol, we've already learned this, but we could just type in the company name, and then in the drop-down menu, it will propose possible things that we might be looking for. Here's our Apple Incorporated common shares. I'm going to click on that, and this loads up that Trade tab. So I want to acquaint us, first of all, with some of the features as we move across the rows here, maybe some of the things over here But then we're going to move pretty quickly into placing trades. And then we'll look at some of the other tools that are available down below. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is use these little arrows or carrots to collapse things so we can get a closer view. All right. I'm going to click on the little arrow next to underline, and it collapses that. I'm going to click under option chain, and it collapses that. Then you can see these other tools that are going to be available to us that maybe have been spread out. Maybe they had accordioned out off the bottom of the page. But let's just start top left, move left to right, and get acquainted with this page. So first of all, we're going to be spending really all of our time here on the All Products sub-tab, and a lot of this the navigational learning that we accomplish here is going to be portable over to the other sub-tabs here if we were trading other products. But today's going to be all about stocks and options, which are maybe more applicable to a broader portion of my typical audience. All right. Now, in addition to these other products that could be traded, there are some other tools here. This active trader tool, which can be found on the trade tab. I'm not actually going to be diving into that today because that's a lesson unto itself. So I've actually already prepared a webcast that I called a guide to the active trader tool on Thinkorswim. And what I'll do so that you can have access to that discussion, let me just copy and paste that link. Let's copy that. Let's paste that in there for our live audience. And I'll try to also remember to include that in the video description after I posted this to YouTube. So you can go down in the video description, find that link as well. But yeah, I actually went into good detail in using this active trader tool. And I'm probably going to be posting a couple of other webcasts that I've done in the past. So if you are not familiar, maybe you're brand new to our educational offerings on YouTube, do yourselves a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel right now. You can go down in the lower right-hand corner, click on the subscribe button. But our YouTube channel is where we house all of these previously delivered webcasts, and we include those in playlists. So for example, if I want to find the playlist for this Getting Started with Thinkorswim webcast series, I can click on playlist. Mine happens to be the very last one. Just coincidental. But there it is. I can go to the view full playlist and we can see those other lessons that we've already done and other topics that have already been tackled. Janelle, you're welcome for that link. Absolutely my pleasure. Watch out. There are going to be a couple more coming your way. Let's go back to the platform. And now that we've loaded Apple, I want to just now move through some of these other functions and then get on to doing some trades, some example trades. So one thing I do want to note is there's a little arrow just to the right of this symbol box, and that gives us access to quicker access to a range of other things like symbols that are sitting in watch lists that we have right now, positions, maybe indices. For example, if I wanted to get a quick quote on the S&P 500, I could go to this indices tab that pops up when I click on that little arrow, and I can find those major indices. Here's the NASDAQ Composite, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and I can scroll right to the bottom. There's the S&P 500. Lots of other, it's just a quick tool that gives us access to other quotes and things like that without having to know all the symbols off the top of our heads. There are thousands and thousands of trading symbols. Don't feel the pressure to have to know them all. You can either do a search up here, or you can use this drop-down menu, and that'll give you access to maybe some of those more commonly used symbols. So moving further to the right here, we have our familiar linking feature, which allows us to link features on this page to features on other tools. So for example, if we have the link here on our watch list linked with the same number, the same color on our trade tab, we can click on some other symbol and it'll just automatically populate that into our trade tab. There we go. I'm going to go back to Apple. But we're already familiar with that. Moving further to the right, we have the name of the company. We have its current trading price, $209.99 and 5/1000. It's half a penny. So we're just shy of 210 bucks. Then we can see whether we're up or down in numerical terms and percentage terms today. So Apple's having an okay day, up about 0.42%. We can see the bid price and the ask price. We can see this ETB. Here's a quick question for you. What in the world is ETB? Or sometimes it'll say HTB. What does that mean? You can see as I point at it, it's telling me this acronym ETB stands for easy to borrow. This would be for traders who are maybe looking to borrow shares to sell. This is telling us, is there a large inventory of those shares, or is there a shallow or maybe no inventory of shares to borrow? I'm not going to get deeply into why someone might borrow and sell shares beyond, like, you've probably heard of the phrase selling short, selling shares that we don't own with the hope that they go down in value. Just be aware, if a trader does that, it can potentially make money if the stock does go down in price, but also has unlimited exposure to the upside. All right, anyway, and as always, we'd want to thoroughly understand any approach to the markets before employing that. Next, we can see where our security is traded. This happens to be on the NASDAQ. We can see MMM. What does MMM stand for? Who wants to see if they can pass this pop-up quiz? MMM stands for the market maker move. Market maker. I don't even want to really get into who they are. They serve to provide liquidity in markets. But in any case, this market maker move, you'll see it says plus and minus 281.9 right now. In other words, $2.89 or 82 cents. This is basically an estimated range of how much Apple might change in value today based on the pricing of its options. Actually, we can extrapolate based on demand for options how much investors are possibly expecting a stock to move. If it's not expecting much movement, the expected range will be narrower. Options demand will be lower. And the opposite might be the case as well. But anyway, it's just an estimate to get a gauge of maybe anticipated volatility of a stock. Further over to the right, company profile. So Janelle, you were all ears about the MMM. There you go. Market maker move is the answer. And so this is just basically saying Apple may go up or down $2.82 today. Up 282, down 282. Does that mean it can't travel outside of that range? Of course not. It's just an estimate. Just extrapolating based on demand for options today, how much volatility is expected from the stock and how far that volatility might carry price. Okay. Then we have our company profile. How many of you have had the courage to click on this while in your simulated trading environment? Really, we should feel comfortable clicking on just about anything in the paper money software. This is where we can practice with things in a no risk environment. So if we click on that company profile, what this does is we're presented with, and I'm not going to go deeply into this tool, but kind of a nifty little tool here. It gives us a breakdown of where a company derives its revenue. So for example, where is 42.6% of revenue coming from for Apple? If you've wondered what the significance of the phone division is for Apple, it's about 42.6%. But they also provide services, 34.3%. Apple Watch, 9.6%. Mac and iPad, they are trailing way down there. Now, lots of other things I could do, but I did want to point out there is that kind of cool little feature that a lot of people just aren't aware was available right there on that trade tab. Now, beyond that, we're going to have lots of other familiar functions. Yes, there are customizations that can be made up here. So whenever we see a gear, that means that we can customize something specific to that feature, whatever it is that we're looking at. So I'm going to click on this gear because I'm not worried. I'm in the paper money environment. And I'll notice that it's showing us, okay, so I have some checkboxes here for our trade grid. For our option grid, there's no checkbox. Actually, that's a lock, meaning can't change it. Option statistics, which is down lower. So there's today's option statistics, option time and sales, and product depth. Well, some people just don't use some of the features of Thinkorswim, and that can unnecessarily clutter the workspace. If we're not, let's say we just don't have a habit of using product depth, maybe we don't use options time and sales, we don't have to have them using up valuable real estate if we don't need them. So we can just uncheck that box. I'm going to put those back on because we need to talk about them. Oh, voice is struggling. Hold on a second. There we go. Now these menus over here, click on them, figure out what they offer. Yes, for each of these individual fields within Thinkorswim, you'll notice there's a detach function. We've used that in lesson 1. I think we also use that in lesson 2. But what that does is it separates that field from the rest of the platform and allows us to maybe move it over to a side monitor, keep our eye on it while we continue to navigate the full platform. So for example, if I clicked on this and I click detach, it just separates the entire trade tab. It doesn't pull it off the platform. It duplicates it, opens that in its own window. So we can then just shift that over to a side screen if we want to have access to, let's say, charts and the trade tab at the same time. So watch for those detach. In this case, I launched that from the menu, but you can also see there are detach icons throughout the platform. That's what this stacked set of squares is. And then let's also just click on this other menu so that we can see, okay, it looks like we can, for example, send this linking. We can send the Apple link to a different link. We can get more info about Apple, maybe bring it up on a chart. We can do a quick chart. Explore those menus on your own. I would love to just go through every single function on Thinkorswim. Sometimes it's more of a higher level introduction to the potential that exists, and then an invitation to explore that potential on your own, because we just can't cover everything in 45 minutes. So I do want to cover what I would consider to be sort of the basics, possibly the essentials. But that's it. I think that's a pretty good introduction to the features up here, to the tools down here. There are a couple of others, I suppose, that we could cover just quickly. For example, there, when we see a little triangle there, that's an expand and then hide feature. So like if I wanted to open up my option chain, we can click on that expand and then collapse it. That's what that's doing. And while we're at it, there's also a little customize right here for our options, time, and sales, where we can modify the individual elements here, right? Maybe I'll come back to that a little bit later. I think, all right, it would have been a little bit remiss if I didn't at least touch on those two. But let's get back to the stuff that I think a lot of people are going to be keenly interested in. Cameron, how do I place trades? Well, when we pop in a symbol on the trade tab, we get all this quote data down below under what's called underlying. Underlying in options trader speak just means the stock or the related security that we're trading options on. But here it just means the stock, in this case, Apple. So it gives us the current price of Apple. It tells us how much we're up or down, the bid price and the ask price, the size of the bid and the ask, the total trading volume for the day, where it opened, the high and the low. And so a lot of information that's available there by default. Now, in addition to that, there's also a little arrow here. And when we see an arrow, we know that that is a hide reveal function. Click on that arrow and it gives us a second line. And I can't tell you how many times I've shown this to somebody who's been using Thinkorswim for a while. And they go, wait a minute, I didn't even know all that additional information was there. Yeah, this will now show us the last size. In other words, how many shares traded on this last exchange of shares. We can see the net change in percentage. Oh, pardon me. That's what I get for looking at one row and start talking about the other. This is the dividend yield if a dividend is offered on a stock. We can see the PE ratio. We can see the absolute dividend value as of the most recent dividend. The frequency of the dividend, this one's quarterly. We can see the ex-dividend date from the most recent dividend. We can see the 52-week high and low, number of shares outstanding, and the beta. This is a measure of volatility that some traders use just to gauge, well, if this stock, if I were to put it on a scale of really calm to really hyperactive, where does it fall on that scale? And what we use as a benchmark with beta is the S&P 500. If we have a stock that just tends to move in sort of right in step with the S&P, we would say that it has a one-to-one relationship with the S&P. In other words, it would have a beta of 1. If it's less volatile than the S&P, it would have a beta below 1. If it's more volatile than the S&P, it has a beta above 1. So kind of unsurprisingly, Apple's a little bit more volatile. With a beta score of 1.2, we would say Apple tends to be about 20% more volatile than the S&P. But since it's a positive number, it's positively correlated to the S&P. If it moved inversely to the S&P, it would have a negative beta score. All right, so all of that sat there waiting for us, but this has us prepared just by entering a symbol and going down to this now familiar row. We're actually also prepared to place a trade. Let's say that we wanted to buy some shares of Apple. Thinkorswim, actually, so many functions are designed for speed. How do we place a trade for buying shares? We just click on the ask price. When I want to buy something, I might say, hey, how much you asking for that car or for that house? And we pay that ask price. So I click on that ask price and it creates a complete buy order for me. Now it's a complete but customizable buy order. So it's an order to buy, in this case, 10 shares. If you were to do this on your paper money at home, it would probably come up with a default of 100 shares. That's because I've changed the default settings up here for my orders. So just so you know, you didn't do anything wrong if yours says 100 there. Up here under setup for the whole platform, I can change the settings for this application. I changed my order default to a default of 10 shares, but yours probably says 100. Okay, I'm going to leave mine at 10 shares. So we have 10 shares. If I didn't want to buy 10 shares this time, I can just type in whatever I want there. I'm going to buy 53 shares of Apple. It's a stock, $210 per share. You know what? For this, let's just say we're going to buy 1 share. Just to minimize, I don't know, the psychological pressure of the trade. In any case, even though it shouldn't be any because we're in paper money, we can see the current price. We can establish that as a limit for how much we want to pay. So for example, if I see the stock is trading right around 210 bucks and I want to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to pay a penny more than $210. I can set that as a limit. Now, if I set a limit for how much I'm willing to pay, it doesn't mean I'm guaranteed that I will pay that price. If the stock isn't isn't available for that low of a price, the order just won't fill. Now, if I establish a limit of 210, it's possible it might fill for less than that, just not more than that. So here's where I could change my order criteria. If the trader is just willing to pay whatever the market demands, we could change this to a market order. A market order obviously would run the risk of, if you didn't like what the market was demanding, well, it's out of the trader's control if they send off a market order. We can set our time in force right here. Now, I could go through, there are other order types. Can we touch on this? WF says, can you show that again, the default shares screen and where to get it? Yep. And of course, if you happen to miss anything in one of these presentations, the vast majority of these presentations are pretty quickly added to our playlist on our YouTube channel. So you can just go back and rewatch. But yeah, I don't mind showing that again. It's setup, application settings, order defaults, and it's right there. We can change the default quantity for stocks, for options, and for others. All right. But yeah, there are different order types. We have market, we have limit. There we have a stop order, can be used for buying stocks or for selling stocks. Typically, it just means, hey, this is the way that I think about it. We put in a condition, and if price achieves that condition, hey, stop, I want to get into the trade, or stop, I want to get out of the trade at this point. Now, it doesn't actually stop price. It just triggers an order to go off to market at that point, and then it fills where it fills. It becomes a market order, and that it's not a guarantee that we'll sell or buy at a specific price. The rest of these, I think what I'll do, instead of going through each one of these individually, I have another video for you. I actually made a webcast, I made a video. It's called 10 Quick Ways to Place Stock Trades on Thinkorswim. And I'm just going to copy that just to save us some time here. Let me paste that into the chat window. Send that off. There we go. Heather says, can you explain MOC, market on close? It literally means place a market order right at closing bell, try to get us in right last second, basically. Anyway, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead with a stock order. So to buy, after all of this talk about placing a trade, what have I done so far? I actually could have done it just this quickly. Click on the ask price. There's my order to buy 10 shares. Choose my order type. And I'm ready to confirm and send this order. Now, this is where the blood pressure can go up a little bit. The heart rate increases. About to place a trade. We haven't committed to anything yet. Even if we click confirm and send, that sounds like we just sent off an order. We actually didn't. Instead, we got what's called the order confirmation dialog box. And when we're in the simulated trading environment, we get this reminder, this is a simulation, not a real trade. So now the heart rate starts to go back down again. And we can just read through and confirm the order. Now, everybody's habits are a little bit different, but it might be a good habit to just read this out loud to oneself. Buying 10 shares of Apple to market price. Am I okay with that? It's going to cost about $2,100. There's not a commission here. But if we're able to buy it, at or near current market prices, this is a good indication of approximately what that would cost. And I can even route this to a specific account in my portfolio. If we have multiple accounts, we can tell it, I want to buy this one in my IRA, or maybe I want to route this one over to our margin account. Right now, we're in our fake IRA account. So let's just keep it there. Now, if I send this off, that's when we're committed. But before I do, if there's a red bar down here, just take the extra time to read through it. With market orders, prices can change quickly in fast market conditions, resulting in execution prices that can be different from the quotes displayed at order entry. In other words, this is a good reminder that if we send off a market order, we're not guaranteed that we're going to pay whatever we happen to be seeing at that moment. That's right. Anyway, yeah, I'm not actually going to send this order off, but if I did, maybe I should. Why not? I'm going to send this off. There we go. Just bought 10 shares of Apple, and we get a little confirmation right up here. Then we can go back and monitor that trade in the way that we learned last time. Now, that's if we wanted to place a buy order. What if we want to place a sell order? Well, here we just click on the bid price, and it creates a sell order. And I'm just going to change this. I could choose my different order types here. I'm going to sell those same shares. Okay. Now, this is just in paper money. It's just for example purposes. When we trade intraday, there can be rules associated with that, so be aware. But I'm going to click confirm and send. But notice how quickly that was accomplished. Ask price to place a buy order, bid price to place a sell order, route it to the same place. Here's another reminder that we're selling 10 shares of Apple at the market price. This is really just going to close us out of the 10 that we just opened. With market orders, prices can change quickly in market conditions, resulting in execution prices in fast market conditions, resulting in execution prices that can be different from quotes displayed at order entry. Send that off. And we just bought and sold shares of stock. So let's now spend our remaining time getting acquainted with the rest of these functions down below to the extent possible, and also see if we can squeeze in an option trade. So trade grid. How many of you use the trade grid here? This can be a nifty little tool to keep your eye on things that are important to the trader. So when we open up the trade grid, by default, it's going to be opening up 3 little windows here. And then we can load up different gadgets, much like we have gadgets in the left column over here. We can load up those gadgets right here. Chart, in this case, what do we have? Our live news here. These are customizable. So let's say I like that we have a chart there. Well, let's move over to this gadget and use a little menu here. And we're going to switch that gadget from the live news. Maybe we want to keep our eye on the level 2 information. Or maybe in this column, let's switch up our gadget. And let's say we want our active trader tool here. So just know that these are customizable little fields and allows us quick access to different tools right here while we're on the trade tab. Now we can also expand that. We can open up more tools. Now, obviously, the more we open here, the more sort of compressed that's going to be. So just be, cautious if using that, or if we want to, we can detach that feature. That gives it more space if we want to expand it and then move it off to the side. All right. So I'll close up that trade grid. Let's move on to a popular one, the option chain. Option chain, this is obviously targeted more toward those that are actually interested in trading options. But this is where we'd go to find options related data and plan and we place those trades. So we can see here options available on Apple that go all the way from 2-day contracts all the way down. Let's just scroll on down all the way out to 884 days. Now within each one of those, if we click on an individual expiration, so let's maybe use the 15th of August contracts, I'm going to open that up and I can see the available strikes. And then I can see the call information on the left. I can see the put information on the right. Now, before I go further with that, I did want to point out, I think that these are sometimes tools that get overlooked. We have a filter tool right here that can allow us to show maybe just the calls or maybe just the puts. If we check the box, for example, and just show the calls, it gives us more space. It gets the puts out of the way. Or we can switch those over and just look at puts. Or we can choose both. Just uncheck the box and it'll default to both. Yeah, strike a deal, Janelle. It's exactly what I like. That's the terminology that I use in my little internal conversation to remember what a strike price means. We can choose different expiration types, quarterlies, weeklies, or just all of them. We can choose deliverables, kind of a fancy term. Are they just regular contracts, standard contracts? Are they non-standard? Do they represent different quantities of stock? Are they minis, like just 10 contracts? We can even select, let's say that our trader has a preference for the specific number of days till expiration, and maybe they don't need all of the other expirations. Maybe some contracts expire too soon for the trader to be interested in them. Maybe some expire too far out. So we can set maybe a range. So as an example range here, these are numbers I put in, let's say 20 days to 100 days. If I check that box, I'm now not seeing all those other expirations, just the ones 23 to 93 days to expiration. Let's uncheck that box. We can limit it to which strike prices we want to see or specific exchanges. I did want to give that a little bit of attention. This feature, let's open up one of our chains again here. And let's talk about this spread function. The spread tells us, well, this is a function a trader might use if they have a specific option strategy in mind. By default, it's going to say single. That's assuming that we're trading single legs, and it's showing every individual strike here. Now, sometimes a trader is like, well, maybe I like to trade vertical spreads. Well, we can click on spread and change this to verticals, and then that pairs up the strikes, one strike with the next. By default, it's just going to go one strike increment apart, right? So, for example, let's say that our Apple would-be option trader trades vertical spreads, and they choose this, and then they can look quickly and see, let's say they were interested in buying a long call vertical. Maybe they're going a little bit in the money with a stock trading at 210, maybe the 200, 205 as an example. They can now trade that just by clicking on the bid price or the ask price. Or we can choose other strategies here as well, right? So that's that feature. One other thing that I might point out here, kind of a nifty little tool for our options traders. So I'll click on this. Let's go down to deep and wide. And maybe to see this function, let's set it back to single. And let's say that our trader was interested in maybe buying, who knows, maybe the 195 call, and then they want to skip over one strike increment and sell the 205 call and create their long call vertical. I know I'm talking call language or options language right now. It doesn't apply to everybody, but I'm just trying to do justice for as many tools as I can here. But let's say that we were interested in trading two options, but they're two strikes apart. They're both in the same expiration, same month, is 2 strikes apart. Here's where we might go to spread single, go down to deep and wide, and maybe choose 1 month, 2 strikes. Both contracts in the same month, so 1 month, but they're 2 strikes apart. Then if we choose vertical, this actually now skips over 1 strike increment, and I can see like the 195 paired with the 205 instead of the 195 paired with the 2 or the 200, and we can trade using the bid and ask price from there. There we go. Now, finally, before we place our option trade, we have customizable columns here. By default, our columns are always going to show the bid price and the ask price. We're always going to see the expiration. We're always going to see the strike price. We can minimize the number of strike prices that we display by choosing a number from here or putting in a custom number. So like, let's say I just want to see, 20. Apple has a lot of strike prices. Let's just show 20. 10 in the money, 10 out of the money. Well, the other columns, the columns that have a little arrow, see the little triangle in the lower right-hand corner of each of these columns? That implies that those are customizable columns. And we can customize them individually by clicking on a column heading and choosing from all sorts of other columns that we might choose to load. Like, for example, maybe I want to change this from last X, that just means the last price, to maybe I want to see, the open interest. Now I have a column for open interest. Or maybe I want to change the net change. Let's go down to the option theoreticals and Greeks. Maybe I want to see the delta. So I can change those individually, or I can use this menu right up here and change them broadly. So for example, I can choose a whole, let's say I wanted to see all the Greeks, delta, gamma, theta, vega. It's not all. Actually, rho is not there among a couple of other more sort of secondary Greeks. Anyway, let me just choose the Greeks, and that has customized those columns. Now I'm seeing each of the Greeks. So experiment with that. We can even set up a custom column set right here, which just allows us to choose columns and replace the current set as we like. I won't do that in lesson 1 and lesson 2. We learn how to sort of shift around different columns using features like that. But let's place an option trade. So if we bought and sold stock by clicking on the bid and the ask price, guess what we do? We buy and sell shares here. Click on the ask price to place an order to buy an option. Click on the bid price to place an order to sell an option. So let's say our Apple trader, maybe they're going to buy a 210 call. We just click on the ask price, and that creates a complete but customizable order. Mine by default is going to be for 1 contract because I changed my order defaults right up here. Application center settings, order defaults for options. I set that to 1. All right, but we can change the expiration, strike price, the type from call to put if we like. We can choose among the familiar order types, the time in force. But once we've customized that to our heart's content, we can confirm and send that order just like with a stock trade. I'm not going to do that today. Let's just click delete. I just wanted to show how quickly we can create a buy order or how quickly we can create a sell order by clicking on the bid price. There's a sell order for a 210 call. I'm going to delete that one. And I think what we'll do now, let's minimize our option chain so we can see some of these other tools and give them a few minutes attention. Today's option statistics are just telling us information about the options on Apple specifically. So for example, we can see the 52-week high and low range for implied volatility. Implied volatility can give some options traders insight into the general pricing of options on a particular stock. So if I look at this and I see, looks like the lowest implied volatility for the year, for the last 52 weeks, was 18%. The highest implied volatility was 71-ish%. And right now, our current implied volatility is 32%. That strikes me as being a little bit toward the low end of that range. If 18 is the low and 71 is the high, we're down here around 32. that's actually at the 27th percentile for the range of implied volatility. And to an options trader, that might tell them, okay, so prices are actually comparatively low right now across most options on this stock's options compared to where they've been over the last 52 weeks. Now we can see other data about the options for Apple right here. We can see what's the total volume of calls, the total volume of puts, the total volume of options overall. We can see how many traded at the bid on the executions, how many of those were at the bid price or below, how many were at the ask price or above, how many were in between. We can also see something over here called the Sizzle Index. Sizzle Index is just telling us whether the options on a particular stock are trading heavily, are they hot, or are they relatively cool. This has a Sizzle Index of about 1.1, which means overall options are trading about 10% as heavy as they typically would be at this time of the trading session, 10% heavier, all right, than normal. Calls are about 16% heavier than normal. Puts are a little bit lighter, only about 93% of normal at this point. That's what this Sizzle Index means. So today's option statistics, yep, we're getting into the weeds a little bit if you don't happen to be an options trader, but it's sort of the nature of the game when we have tools, hopefully for just about everybody out there. Options time and sales data can be accessed right here. Starts things off. So if you don't know what time and sales is, this is telling us trade by trade, what were the characteristics of individual trades, either on stocks, if it's a stock time and sales chain, or for options. In this case, this is Apple's options. So I can see the characteristics of those trades. And you can see the timestamps over here. This is second by second. And we can see which options are being traded. Calls or puts. We can see the quantity. We can see the price of the execution, which exchange provided the quote, the market for those trades, the delta for the execution, the implied volatility. We can see what the underlying stock price was trading for at the time. And we can see something called the condition. That's a fancy way of saying what kind of a trade was this? Was this like a spread trade? So I can even, if I want to click on a little gear up here. Actually, sorry. It's going to be, where did I put that? There it is. I'm going to click on the little customize icon, click on the condition here. And for example, I can just see those trades that were part of a spread. See that right there? So each one of these, starting to see wider increments in the prices because we're seeing just the spread trades. Let me uncheck that box. But that can be kind of nifty. And right up there at the top are the biggest trades of the day, the heaviest quantity. If you want to see, what were the largest trades on options on Apple, that's where we would find that. And we can see instead of maybe the top 2, that's where we can click on this, maybe see the top 10. So that's option time and sales. Product depth, okay. I wouldn't have spent much time even if I had the time on this. It's not to diminish the tool. It's just a little bit niche for this audience. But this can just show us all sorts of characteristics relating to a full range of series of options on a specific stock. We can look at trading volume or things like the rho, the theta, the gamma, the delta across those ranges. So for example, let me put up a delta. It gives us a grid of deltas across a range of strike prices. Anyway, but guys, that was a lot. I'm aware that we cover a lot of territory in these webcasts. So what I would hope you would do as we go through these lessons is keep an eye out for what's important to you in the potential management of your own self-directed portfolio. And where possible, customize the platform to tailor your approach to your preferred method for managing your portfolio. All right. Everybody, we've accomplished what I set out to do today. I hope you enjoyed that discussion. We're going to be moving on next week to the charts tab. So lesson 4 is going to be that charts tab, talking about loading up stock charts. How do we navigate all the tools on that feature? That's a great resource, but it's time for me to let you go. Kevin, thanks for helping out in the chats. Definitely appreciated. Everybody, make sure that if you haven't done it already, you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click down on that subscribe button down there in the lower right-hand corner. That's where we house all of our previous webcasts. The channel name again is Trader Talks Schwab Coaching Webcasts. You can find our previous webcasts right here under playlists. A few might not make it to the playlist, but the vast majority do. You can join the live streams right here, or you can do searches for topics of specific interest. Now, I'm going to post here one more video. I have one last video for placing options trades in a little bit greater detail. I call it How to Place Options Orders, Basic Trades to Fancy Schmancy. Yeah, out of that title. Enjoy that video. But also make sure that you're following Kevin and me on X. You can find Kevin on X at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me there at Cameron May CS. It's the best place to interact with your favorite presenters in between the live streams. As a matter of fact, we can post very time-sensitive things on here. For example, I noted $250 billion of market capitalization value was lost on the S&P 500 in about 22 minutes. What was going to happen next? Well, we actually saw essentially full recovery in about an hour and a half. That was kind of interesting. But everybody, thanks for giving me your time today. Thanks for clicking the thumbs up or the like button. That's always appreciated, and it gives the webcast a boost in the YouTube algorithm. I'll look for you in lesson 4 next week. I'll also look for you in my other webcasts in between now and then. But whenever I see you again, until that moment arrives, I want to wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.